Hello, welcome to another episode of How to Hook an Agent. My name is Michael Carr with Veritas Literary. If you aren't yet subscribed but would like to hear tips and inside information about the agenting world and publishing, you can go ahead and click on the subscriber button below. Today I want to talk a little bit about conferences, writing conferences, and whether you should consider attending them, what sort of value they might provide. And this is fresh in my mind. It's now summer of 2021, and I have just recently been invited back to my first in-person writing conference. Over the last year, I did quite a few virtual events, but the last event that I did before everything shut down was in February of last year when I was down in Mexico for a writing conference. And as many of you probably know, I really like teaching at conferences. Teaching and presenting and mentoring is something that I really enjoy. It's one of my favorite things about working as a professional in the field of publishing. So for me, I was excited to get that. It's a conference that I've already taught at. Usually I have a little bit of a preference to go somewhere new or do something different, with a few exceptions. There are a few conferences that I just really love, and those I will go back to frequently. Or sometimes I'll receive some compensation. So naturally, if there's a choice between getting paid to do work or not getting paid to do work, as I always say in this industry, you never know where the money's going to come from. So if you have legitimate and ethical opportunities to accept payment for something, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Why do I like teaching at conferences? Well, part of the reason I like it is so much of my work with aspiring writers is filled with rejection. I'm constantly just telling people, no, 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 thank you for submitting, but unfortunately at this time, et cetera, et cetera. And that is really wearing on me. I know it's worse for you as a writer. I've been in position many times of receiving rejections, and I know that's a worse thing, but I also have to do it so much more often. So it's nice to be in a position where I can give feedback to people and take a little bit of time to slow down and work with them. The other thing, and this is something that is very valid from the perspective of a writer as well, is that this field is very solitary a lot of times. When you're working on a book, you're just going to be you and the page and inside of your own head for extended periods of time. You might be able to talk about the book or whatnot, but most of the time, if you're an aspiring writer, you just aren't feeling like you're a legitimate professional most of the time. You tell people you're working on a book and nobody really cares, sadly to say. And my job has a little bit in common with that, where I have a lot of contact with writers and editors and things, but it's at a distance. I don't see them in person. So as much as I enjoyed some of the virtual activities I did this last year, to be able to have an in-person opportunity now, after it will have been more than a year and a half since anything like that, I'm excited about that. And that's because when I come back from an event, I come back with a lot of fresh energy. I've been talking about writing with people who are excited and passionate about it. I'm sharing my opinions, very strong opinions sometimes, and teaching classes and getting a lot of energy from people. And to be honest, when you go as a professional, people really are looking up to you and listening to you in a way that can be a little ego stroking sometimes, maybe too much. It's not healthy all the time, but it definitely makes me come back feeling like, oh, this is an important thing, and I need to redouble my efforts or dedicate myself to what I'm doing. And some of those things are going to be valid for you as a writer too. So going to a conference, especially if you're struggling psychologically, can be a really great thing. And this goes beyond whatever personal contacts you might make at the conference, whether you've pitched your book and had some success. It can even go beyond what you may have learned as you attend various workshops or master classes or sessions, as helpful as those can be. And I feel like one of the important benefits of a conference that's sometimes undersold is the networking you're going to do with your fellow aspiring writers. Look for those sort of opportunities to meet people and to maybe make deeper connections. You might be able to meet up with an online writing group with some beta readers, people who are working in your genre who you don't know, but 5 years from now, some of those people are going to be rising stars in the industry. You might be one of them too, in which case I hope you would pay it forward in the same way that you would hope other people would pay it forward for you. Those are some of the benefits that you can have, in addition to just getting out of your natural environment for a little bit. The same sort of benefits you always get from travel or from events with a lot of high energy people. Having said that, I understand that maybe conferences aren't right for everybody. They can be kind of expensive. The travel aspect can be really expensive, and that was one benefit this last year is virtual events are pretty cheap, all things considered. You don't have to buy a ticket, a plane ticket, I mean. You don't have to pay for lodging. You don't have to take 3 or 4 days off of work. You can go virtually. I hope some of those events will continue, even in a post-pandemic, non-virtual world. We'll see, it's unclear. But I think we're all a little bit more comfortable in running classes and having workshops and communicating virtually, as I'm doing with you right now. So the expense is a definite big one. Sometimes people go when they're not quite ready. I feel like if you're still at a beginner level and you're still figuring out a lot of things, excuse me, if you have to go and you're the one in the back raising your hand at the agenting panel, trying to figure out what an agent even does, those are things that you can find online. And I would assume if you're watching this video, you're in the process of doing some of that research. You're probably not the target audience for that, but I do meet people every year. I think your book's not written, you've never actually finished a book, you're maybe 20 pages into your first novel, you don't have a lot of writing experience, your questions about the industry are very basic. I feel like it's probably too early for you at that point to be attending a conference. Another possible caveat I would give to my suggestion that writing conference can be good is don't use talking about writing as a replacement for actually writing. And anyone who's been to conferences or even belonged to a writing group generally knows what I'm talking about. There are a certain number of people who really like talking about the process of writing, but aren't actually producing anything. So if you have in your mind, I need to keep busy. I'm going to keep busy in this process of becoming a writer. And one of the things I'm going to keep busy at is I'm going to attend 3 conferences this year, whatever it is. If that's a replacement for the actual putting of words on paper, nothing is going to replace putting words on paper. Not reading about writing, not talking to other writers, not going to conferences, not listening to professionals. There's nothing that can take the place of actually producing the words. So make sure that you're doing that above and beyond anything else you are doing. So what kind of conferences should you go to? Well, I will say that there are lots of different conferences. There's one that I've attended in the Pacific Northwest a couple of times that only has about 25 participants. All of the people work closely together, and by the end of the workshop, you know everybody's names, you've looked at all of their work, people are forming relationships. It's usually in a really inexpensive hotel, one of those ones that's right off of the interstate, that's not too thrilling, that's got a strip mall next to it for food. But the more minimalist venue helps to keep the cost down. A lot of the people who attend those are locals. You should always look at your local conferences first to see what's out there and what's available. Those are going to be your most economical and easiest options to attend. On the other hand, you have great big conferences like Surrey International Writers Conference, for example, which is very big, very professional, well run. It's also a little bit on the expensive side, both the hotel and the conference. And And if you're a little bit of an introvert or you're a little bit unsure about meeting people in a professional environment and not sure how to present yourself, that can be overwhelming. It's a little bit like going to a party where you don't know anyone. If you're someone who's comfortable just going right up to people and getting to know them, and you can present yourself well, that can be a great option. If you're an introvert, I would strongly recommend going to a much smaller workshop where you're going to get to know everybody. It'll be a lot more comfortable for you. The other kind can be draining and frustrating, and you might leave feeling like, how much money did I spend? Who did I talk to? Is anyone there even going to remember who I am at the end of this weekend? So I would say keep that in mind. On the other hand, a conference like Surrey is a great option if you've got uh, if you know a few people who are already going to be there, and if you are really, really close to breaking into the industry, because you're gonna their pitch sessions that they have there are give you a chance to talk to a lot of different editors and agents over a fairly brief period of time. So let's talk about pitch sessions a little bit and what you should do for pitch sessions if you go to a conference. You should always be prepared. But as I always tell people, because I frequently meet people who are very nervous about this, and the people who go to a pitch session are a little bit nervous tend to be a little bit confused about the purpose of a pitch session. You are not really there to try to sell yourself as an improv speaker or someone who's prepared. This is not a debate class or acting or a job interview. You're really just there to talk about your work a little bit with someone, and they're going to tell you if that work might be a good match for them. And usually agents and editors at conferences are generous in offering to look at pages, even if sometimes maybe they have a hunch it's not necessarily for them. But at the end of the day, it's going to be your work, your writing, that sells whether someone's going to represent you. It's not your ability to be great at pitching. So there's not as much pressure on you as you think. And it really helps if you go in thinking, I'm just having a conversation that's going to last 10 minutes or 15 minutes or however long the pitch session is about my book. And there's no pressure here. Even if I just blew them away with my presentation, the writing still has to sell itself. And if I can be minimally presentable and not come across as weird or creepy, most of us can manage that for 10 or 15 minutes, right? If I can do that, then the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say, not necessarily for me, but chances are you're going to get someone to say, sure, send me the first couple of chapters or send me the book. And that will essentially buy you a little bit of extra attention when you do send your book in. And as I am always saying, attention in this industry is the most valuable currency. So that's really valuable in and of itself. If you blow it, if you muff up, nobody's going to remember your name afterwards, I promise you. Unless you get weird and stalkery and are trying to slip manuscripts under the stall while the agent is in the bathroom, they're not going to remember you, I promise. So there's no pressure on you at that. So yes, I think you should take advantage of the pitch sessions when they're out there. It's really good, if nothing else, to help you clarify your thoughts of talking about your book and have a professional ask questions, some of which might be really difficult questions, to see if you're prepared. You can learn a lot in those. Don't come pitching your book if it's not ready. In general, I would say that. However, sometimes where our book is in the process and where we are in the writing process aren't necessarily the same thing. So especially if it's a local conference, feel free to sign up for it and just say, my book is not ready, but I have a few questions, and maybe you can give me your insights on what you think about this idea or my characters or whatnot. And that can be very valuable too. Apart from that, just your behavior at a conference should be like it is in any other professional setting. You don't have to be really stressed about it, but act friendly, be interested in other people. Don't be talking about yourself all the time. Express interest in what other people are doing and working on, and you can join and participate and form connections that sometimes, in some cases, might last a lifetime or an entire writing career, we will hope. That's all for now. Thank you.